Hello everyone, Sidewind here, continuing my series on party composition. This is part 2 of the support role, focusing on martial options. So all of the classes featured here play like standard martials, and I'm mainly going to be talking about how you can build almost any martial into one of these options. However, I will still be highlighting certain classes which make it easier to achieve your goal. Okay, so the options here are not only limited to martials. In fact, many of them can still be used by caster classes. So I'll go through each one. So Intimidation, you get the Intimidate action. This provides a penalty to opponents when they fail a will save against your Intimidation check. It's very commonly used by martial classes to provide some support to casters and some bonuses to other martials. Diplomacy is another skill which has an option for support in combat using the Bon Mot action. This requires a feat, however, certain classes gain it automatically through abilities, namely the Swashbuckler Braggart. The next one's Athletics. All of the athletics actions function as martial support, and if you have a character who is good at athletics, you can just fill the support role with that. For Deception, there are two actions, Feint and Create a Diversion. Feint makes the enemy off guard to your next attack, kind of making it a support ability for yourself. And then Create a Diversion can provide other benefits. I'm not as familiar with it because I haven't had a player use it too much. For Medicine, you have Battle Medicine, which requires a feat. And out of combat, you have Treat Wounds, which does not require a feat. There are other feats which boost the medicine skill, but it essentially lets you provide healing without using any spells. Thievery has the Dirty Trick feat, which again it lets you use the skill to debuff an enemy. Performance has Fascinating Performance, also a feat to debuff an enemy. And on the other skills front, you have Recall Knowledge. I created a separate video covering it because it is kind of a big part of Pathfinder 2e martial support. The last option is Alchemy. So you can brew potions with most any character using the Alchemical Crafting feat, and there's a subclass of the Investigator that gets a bonus with it. And of course you have the Alchemist class, but I personally don't really consider the Alchemist a martial so much as a caster. So I'll be covering it in the other video. Alright, so the class highlights for this are, well, almost every martial class, but I'll be talking specifically how each one can do support. So the first one is the Thaumaturge. This is a support-focused martial that mainly uses Recall Knowledge. It can also deal damage, but its main thing is using Recall Knowledge as a rider effect, with some additional abilities to, say, heal allies or debuff enemies, based on their implements, which they have a certain number available, and they can have a certain number out at any one time. I'm pretty sure it's one out at a time because that's why the Thaumaturge nearly always wants one free hand. The second one is the Swashbuckler. I would say this is the only class on this list that is solely support focused. I mean, they still can deal damage, but their main focus is one skill that you select as their style. The options being things like athletics, diplomacy, deception, acrobatics, etc. And they essentially are just a super flashy fighter that supports their allies by using the support abilities of those features and having additional bonuses to them through their class feats. The third one is the Gunslinger, which you can build to be damage focused, but since they use guns, their damage is low except on critical hits. So most of their class feats are actually support in that they give you a bonus to other allies. It's the only class on this list which functions really, really well as a ranged support character. One that is not here, but which I'll mention offhand, is the Investigator, which was featured in the Recall Knowledge video, similar to the Thaumaturge. It's just even more Recall Knowledge focused. The fourth one is the Fighter. It's a generalist martial class, and if you choose a one-handed focus fighter using athletics, it works very well as a support character. You could also potentially use other skills such as intimidation or diplomacy or anything like that, but at that point I would suggest looking at the swashbuckler class or the barbarian intimidation focused route, because the fighter feats are very focused on going down the athletics route using a one-handed weapon and a free hand. Then you have barbarian, which kind of sort of doesn't seem like it should be on this list, but it actually does have a lot of feats supporting athletics and intimidation, and that's why it's here. So if you want to build a character that mostly just beats people up but is a very effective support with athletics and or intimidation, you can go with the barbarian. It's also a very simple class to play in this way because it's mainly smack people, use intimidation. The champion is mainly a tank class, but it has a bit of rider support effects using its auras, so it can provide a bit of it. The rogue is a class which can be a very support-based class because it has a large number of skills. So going back to this previous slide, it could have proficiency in all of these at once and be fairly good at 2 to 3 of them. And they also have rackets, which can give additional bonuses, such as if you're picking one focused on a certain skill, like you might pick the ruffian focused on athletics, then you're going to be very effective at that skill and using it for damage and at the same time support abilities. It just depends on the subclass there. Then the last one I'll mention a little bit is the monk. It's another class that's mostly a tank, but it can also have a bit of an athletics focus in that some of their feats support using athletics actions to support their allies. As you can see throughout this list, though, really to support as a martial, you're using athletics or another skill less than just being a support class, unless you pick swashbuckler, gunslinger, investigator, or thaumaturge, or the one-handed weapon fighter. But all of these are also available to casters, so even if you're more interested in playing a caster, I would suggest reviewing these options. In the next video in this series, I'll be covering caster support options, and I will likely be referring back to this list of skills. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped you figure out how you could build your support martial character.